Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, ladies and gentlemen, wherever you may be in the world. I'm Sarah Jane, and this is Gift of Healing TV. And I am delighted that this evening, because that's where I am, this morning, where my guest is, I'm joined by Brigitte Tan. And the topic for our program this evening is grief. So unrecognized grief, its impact on our life and the solution for it. And let me introduce Brigitte to you, then we can actually get into speaking to her. But thank you for joining me. It's lovely to have you with me. Dr. Brigitte Tan is the founder of From Grieving to Joyful Living coaching service and the creator of Dance Away Sadness, Move Beyond Your Grief support system. Through her work as an oncologist and while going through a multitude of grief herself in 2011, she noticed that there is a part of grief that words cannot touch. In 2014, upon successfully transforming her formerly miserable, broke, heartbroken, and ill health life into a joyful life of peace of mind, abundance, love, and great health, she also greatly benefited from freestyle dancing and founded Dance Away Sadness, Move Beyond Your Grief. Brigitte became a certified grief recovery specialist and life mastery coach to be able to help people beyond the wall of her hospital to fully recover from their grief and thrive. Welcome, Brigitte. It's lovely to have you with us this evening, this morning, this afternoon, wherever you are, folks. Please, will you start by sharing a little of your story of how, I know we've got a little bit within what I've just read, but how you come to do what you do and help people in the way that you do?
Absolutely, absolutely. Thank you so very much, Sarah Jane. And first of all, thank you for having me here. It's such a wonderful honor to be able to be with you, with you, Sarah Jane, and all the audience. It's wherever you are, whether it's evening, morning, in the middle of the night. Thank you for having me here. And so as you hear in my bio, my original training is actually oncology. I'm a veterinary oncologist. And I said I live in my, to me, a wonderful, perfect life. And that is until I was 40 years old. And then one night, seemingly out of the blue to me, my former husband just told me that the marriage over after almost 15 years. And that was quite a bit of a shock to me, to say the very least. And as if that was not enough of a shock, there are like 8 other events in a matter of a year and a half to 2 following that, the dissolutions of my marriage. They all come in one after another, that at the end of that 2 years, I was so miserable. I wish I could die. I wish I could die. I absolutely did not want to go on. But I didn't die. I didn't die. And after some times, I realized that if I have to stay alive, I'm going to thrive, not just survive. And I'm going to learn to way to thrive and do that with ease and joy and fun and having peace of mind. And that's actually when I started my journey, as you mentioned in my bio, into grief recovery and life transformations to help myself initially. And fast forward only about 3 years later, and I look back and I realized that I have gone from broke, heartbroken, sick all the time, miserable all the time, to living a wonderful life with joy and love and abundance more than I could imagine, and having my dreams come true and better health than I've ever have, even compared to when I was in my 20s. And so I realized that I have discovered a great gift, and we know that great gift is not to be kept to oneself. And in addition to that, early part in my journey, I just to help myself feel better, I used to I would listen to music, and I actually after a while, I would start just moving to the music, kind of something in me telling me to just move to the music. So I listened to lots of Enyas actually back then, and in the bedroom, nowhere else is, and then the music's really helped me, and I realized, and I learned actually as an oncologist, my experience as in oncology for 20 years, I learned that there is a part of grief that words cannot touch. Some people, they have grief counseling and everything, and there is still just something that stay behind. And I was the same way to a degree that way. Some of us cannot express our feelings in words, but actually movements will be able to allow us to go deep into ourselves and express what we need to express, as well as release what we need to release. And so that's when I also started Dance Away Sadness, Move Beyond Your Grief. And the goal, the purpose of all is to be able to help people in multiple different way, in whichever way, whether it is through words or through movement, that will be able to help all of us not just recover from our grief, but to actually thrive, and doing that with ease and joy and fun.
Oh, and it is so important to have the fun.
Yes.
It really is important to have the fun. And you talking there, and I was thinking, although it was me that broke my second marriage up, when I moved to Bournemouth, and I met a wonderful group of friends, and I ended up working in a singles club as security on the door. But after a certain time, we were then encouraged to go in and to be able to dance and talk to everybody. And so I spent a lot of time. Now, I didn't feel I was in grief at that stage, but dancing it's listening to that music. But then, because I work with sound energy, music, music, sort of depending on the mood you're in as to which music you should listen to.
Yes, exactly.
Because it can very definitely enhance whatever mood you're in, or bring you around to a better mood. And so when you were talking, I was just thinking, do you know what? I used to do an awful lot of dancing. So
perhaps time's to go back to a little more dancing.
Not sure I want to do the singles clubs anymore. I wasn't looking for a relationship, but it was just fun.
Sometimes the living room is just the best place to dance, or the bedroom even.
Well, I must admit, actually, when I'm some of the teaching I do, we bring in music, and it's they're mantras, but it's just like, do you know what? If you want to move to this mantra, just get up and do it.
Yeah, exactly.
So you found dance to be really powerful as a tool for supporting with this.
Yeah, dancing and music are very powerful. It's the combinations of those I think is the most powerful things. The combination of music and movement, because it's kind of when you're speaking, it's a different vibrations than the vibrations. And we're talking about just vibrations. I mean, everything's vibrating. The cells in our body, everything vibrating. We're not talking about some woo-woo stuff about vibrations. It's just physics. Everything's vibrating. And if you look at the way the molecules working in the body, in one way, and when we're speaking, the energy vibrations is one. When it's music, particularly music that goes up and down, that's a different vibration. And when you have movement, the movements also allow a completely different vibrations. And so when you combine between the energy vibrations of music and the energy vibrations of movement, that's kind of allow your body to experience multiple different vibrations. And it's very interesting. Dr. Joe Dispenza, some of us might have heard his name. Dr. Joe Dispenza says that when we read something or we hear something, it gets into our mind. But when we experience something, some impactful experience, it's actually get into our system, it get into our cells. And so a lot of time with grief, whatever the cause of grief it is, it's an impactful experience. And so it's not just in our head, but it's on our body and our cell. And when you have the cells kind of vibrate at the different state than the mind and all different things. And so that's why I think when you combine the music as well as the movement, the dancing, the freestyle dancing, so you don't have to worry about following steps. And then if you can't follow steps, you have more grief, right? But the freestyle dancing as well as the music, that's kind of, allow yourself to help yourself to vibrate in a slightly different way, and then that will allow you to, if you need to feel your feelings, allow your feeling to feel it. But also when I do Dance Away Sadness, it's so powerful to help people release, and not just things that reasons, but also things that stuck in you for years. I have one person that come to me for one thing, and over time she recognized it's come from something else is back 40 years ago, and the counseling, the coaching part actually helped her release the reasons event and so forth. But the dancing was actually the one was so helpful to help her release and make peace with things that happened 40 years back. So it's just amazing.
And it is, and I think maybe we should go into, because we start have gone to the solution rather than going to but never mind. We don't do this. We're not set in a routine of what we've got to talk about. But maybe we should go back a bit and just go to the reasons for grief, because there are a lot of reasons for grief, and sort of you sort of talked about out of the blue marriage breaking up. Yes, I've had marriages break up. I think they were self-fulfilling prophecies with me because of experiences I'd had as a very, very young child.
Uh-huh.
And as much as I didn't lose my parents, the hospitalization for 3 months, which meant I saw them for an hour once a week, was a very severe form of grief, of loss. And followed by a baby sister who died at 9 weeks old. And I think it's understanding that loss isn't about death only. It's about so much more. And especially with children, grief could come in with a lost toy. So, sort of, I know we mentioned some in the write-up, but do you want to, and I've just mentioned a couple, but do you want to mention a few?
Oh, yeah.
And if anybody wants to mention anything on the chat, please do. But if you don't, I know so many people are very shy and they don't. They just want to listen to us. But then please feel free to. So, yes, let's go back to you and other forms, and I'll see if I can come up with some others as well.
Well, funny that you mentioned that you used to work at the single club, because being single is actually can be one of the cause of grief. So a lot of people think that grief is just the common conceptions of the society is grief is the cause of grief is one of the 3 Ds, is what we call it: death, divorce, or dire diagnosis. But in truth, the Grief Recovery Institute says that grief is the conflicting feelings caused by a change in our familiar routine. That's one. So any changes that happen in our life can cause quite a bit of grief. And then the other thing, when you mention, particularly with children as well as with adults, another common cause of grief is what we call hopes unmet. So whether your hopes is perhaps you don't have a change in routine, but you are hoping, and and a good example of that a lot of people don't think is you are hoping for something, you work for that. Perhaps you are hoping to have a project or something like that, for a positions, and you work for that and you work for that and you do everything you can, and then you didn't get the positions, you didn't get the role. And that's a lot of time. It's actually a grief that we want to recognize that, because a lot of time, if we don't realize that, oh, that's caused grief, and we just kind of stuff it and say, I'm going to be brave. And particularly in this day and age of personal development, everybody said, hey, you got to be positive, And actually, in my recent daily video, I was saying that there is in the personal development, there's a lot of things saying like, oh, it's not failures, it's feedback. And if you read the Thomas Alva Edison's biography, the Edison was asked how could he has 10,000 failures and keep moving on, and he says it's not failures, it's feedback. Well, yes, we understand it's feedback when things don't work out, and we might understand in our mind that it is feedback, but it still hurt our feeling. And we want to acknowledge that, and we want to appreciate and honor that our feeling is still hurt, and that we're still grieving, and not trying to put on a brave face and say, okay, this is not failure, it's feedback. Well, some feedback feels very much like failure, isn't it? And when that's happened, it's okay to be grieving, it's okay to be sad, it's okay to be upset, and we want to recognize that. And the important thing for us to recognize these many different causes beside the 3D as the cause of grief is it because if we don't recognize them and we just kind of try to stuff them away, to push them away, then it actually doesn't go away. We just stuff it in us, and it might actually influence us on how we're going to do things next time. Say for the same example of the hopes unmet, and you are working for a project and working of a project. Now, we try to put a brave face when we did not get the role or the project or the positions, and at the same time, it's actually weighing us inside. What can happen is next time an opportunity comes through, if there is still waste inside of us, there is still grief left over inside of us, it actually might make us not put as much energy and effort into that, or make us hesitant about doing things and say, well, what about if I got hurt again? Because nobody want to get hurt. And if you still have left over hurt inside of you, then you will be hesitant. This is the same thing with other things as well. When there is an unrecognized grief, other common example of cause of unrecognized grief is actually things where people are supposed to be joyful. So we talk about the hopes unmet, but also we talk about the changes. Any changes can cause us to have griefs, and anything that and it does include things that we're supposed to be joyful. Talking about not recognizing them, one common cause of grief that people don't know is actually getting married. Getting married, and particularly if you have to get married and you move for your marriage, now you are with a new lifestyle, and you're also in a place where you might not know where the grocery or the neighbors or anything like that. And so if you have grief and we don't recognize them, or we notice we're grieving, but we're trying to put on a brave face and just try to stuff them away, in those scenarios, what happened is we actually develop subconscious resentment. And that resentment will be directed to who we subconsciously feel that the cause of the grief, which in this case, your new spouse. Not exactly the best way to be starting a marriage. So that's those are couple things. Another common and actually have this recent clients with this. Another common couple other common cause of grief that people a lot of time don't recognize is things like retirement and emptiness.
Yeah.
And so, all of these things are things that we're supposed to celebrate and be happy about. And that's the tricky part of things, because we like, in my client case, just let's call her Margie. She's like, my husband's just retired, and instead of being happy, he's moping around the house, and guys don't even have to work. What is he moping around about? And at the same time, that with that couple, and so she came to me thinking about getting a divorce after 40 something years of marriage, which is really heartbreaking. And so when I talked to her, I discovered that the reasons they was splitting is because the husband retired about a year prior, and since then he's just become a different person. But what we don't think is, when we retire, not only we have a drastic change in routine. If you usually go to work 8 to 5 or something, now you have a drastic change in routine. A lot of time it's also for some people, it's actually feeling that they lost their identity. A lot of us nowadays identify ourselves with our work and our profession. It's kind of feeling a loss of identity, so it's like a double loss there. And so and if we don't recognize, like with Margie, they were, they have great relationships before he retired, and with them it was a double whammy, so to say. With them, he retired, and then the last couple months, their adult son, their only child, got married and moved out of the country. And so it was like the retirements and the emptiness in a slightly different form, and that really got to them, and they were like basically just going against each other in the house, which is really, really sad. And thankfully, when we recognize grief and we work on that, in most cases almost all cases, we'll be able to resolve our grief. And with that one, they have a much better relationship now, and going around the world checking out their bucket list, which is wonderful for them. And so that is and the other thing that I like to point out with a lot of time, the unrecognized source of grief, particularly in this society where we are all want to be productive, is actually things such as promotion and relocations for work. If you got promoted, even if you work in the same place, you will have different roles, and you might have to interact with different people. And when we don't recognize that, that can cause us to feel uneasy inside of us, and all those, any change that cause conflicting feelings can cause grief. Then what happened is the promotions and the particularly if you have to get promotion and have to relocate, any move can cause grief. That will cause us grief. And then what happened is we actually end up, because when we're grieving, we don't focus. We have a hard time focusing a lot of time. We're forgetful. Another common thing is we are irritable. Grief doesn't always come. Actually, in a lot of cases, grief does not necessarily shows up as sadness. We think when somebody grieving that they are sad, but actually grieving, it's just a conflicting feeling. So it's not always sadness. It could be one of the most common disguise of grief is actually irritability. We're just irritable. Some people has a long-lasting, deep anger, and unable to focus, change in our sleep pattern or our eating pattern. All of those could be symptoms of grief that has absolutely nothing to do with sadness. And so that's something that we want to be aware as well, not just in recognizing the grief, but also recognizing the symptoms that we might have that come from grief. And the important thing with that is in the workplace, and most of us have the need to work. When we are grieving, particularly we are grieving at the workplace because we cannot focus. We are a lot of time feel apathy or not having the zest of want to do things. Then we have decrease in productivity. And if we're irritable and grumpy and moody, then naturally it's influence our interactions with our colleagues, and it might be your new colleagues in your new positions, and so that's that alone, the decrease in productivity and not being able to perform as great as we want them to be, and not having the best relationships, that will cause more grief. And so it's become like an evil cycle that just the grief. There's a say the Grief Recovery Institute says grief is cumulative and cumulatively destructive, and that's very, very true. It's not just like a hamster wheel that you got stuck in, but it's almost actually it's like a spiral that got bigger and bigger and bigger. And so those are quite a few common causes of talking about the different causes of grief. And back to the topic today, unrecognized grief. Those are among the more common one, but there are actually the Grief Recovery Institute identify more than 43 different causes of grief, including world events. In the United States, there are more and more shootings going around. That's really heartbreaking. And even if we are not right in the middle of the shooting, or perhaps it's a natural disaster, it's affected us just to hear that, oh, there is another shooting, or there is, like you just mentioned earlier today, the earth, the world is being, the weather changes, and there is fire in Amazon and fire in Africa and all these things. And where I live, I live in a part of California that like to catch on fire on yearly basis every fall. And just like it's, if you don't clear that up, and I actually experienced this myself, not realizing it the first time around. The first time I have to evacuate, I was like, okay, let's get evacuated and all this thing, and my house actually stay intact and everything, but not thinking about this. And so even if you are a counselor, you're a grief coach, you're a grief specialist, sometimes we want to be watchful for ourselves too, because not thinking about it, I went through the motions, so to say, but then I didn't check back into me. And then I noticed that the next year, as the fire season come close, I start to have anxiety and I couldn't sleep well. And I said, oh my goodness, there was some grief and things that I did not clear out, and so it's therefore affecting the peace of mind and the ease and the joy and being able to have fun. If you have to keep looking back behind your back for whether it's a fire or a shooting or something like that, and so and also it's affecting productivity as well. If we are constantly thinking about something else. We know that the grief for multiple different reasons and multiple different causes actually cost the workplace. The Grief Recovery Institute did a study that grief has cost workplace in general. The cost of grief to workplace is $75 billion a year. Amazingly, it's scary high number, and that's a lot of time, not just from grief that come from death or diagnosis or divorce, but actually a lot of this unrecognized cause of grief that influence people ability to be productive and to be able to live with thrive and ease.
Yeah. Oh, and I suppose goes back to, I've got double feedback here at the moment. I've seen what we don't deal with, our solar plexus is like a well that we put what we haven't dealt with in. And of course that then becomes full of a whole load of gunk and horrible stuff. And that then comes back to bite us. But I also mentioned earlier about self-fulfilling prophecy, which does go back to the grief in respect, that feeling of not being loved, being unworthy, etc., etc. Mm-hmm. And it's like, well, okay, whatever it is, it's not going to last because I haven't dealt with the grief from that very first thing that happened. And so I suppose you said you had this client and they come to do the dance, but they discovered it was something way back.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's a matter of something happens today that brings us back, and the body turns around and says, yes, now it's time to deal with that. Only it doesn't know how to tell you And so that is where the dis-ease comes in, isn't it?
Absolutely. Yeah.
So it's that storing stuff that we haven't dealt with, it comes back to bite us, but the mind gets involved, creating self-fulfilling prophecy of things not going right.
Yeah.
And not lasting, etc., etc. So it's breaking that cycle, what we would call a vicious circle.
Yes, exactly.
Because the mind helps create even more grief because we haven't been able to deal with the initial grief. That's my sense of what I feel is being said here.
Yeah, absolutely. It's definitely when we the mind, we have something in us, and then it's like you said, it's become a cycle because the minds have catching on that, and then as everything's related to our thoughts, including and particularly our subconscious thoughts. So if it's like with your example, feeling undeserving and things not gonna last and unloved and things like that, your mind actually will subconsciously look for evidence in that, and then it's that evidence brings in will make it happen, and then brings in more grief, and it's just become one after another self-fulfilling prophecy, and then over time it's got more and more and more and more. And then it's also do manifest, as you mentioned, in multiple different ways. A lot of time the grief doesn't come in the form of sadness, or perhaps at the moment we have sadness, but as time goes by, this buried grief, or this actually grief that we attempt to bury it, but actually get into our life in much in a much more different way. It could be anger, it could be irritability, but it's a lot of times also even physical symptoms. A lot of people that has unexplained headaches, or one person came to me because she has progressive panic attacks. She used to have anxiety, and then she has panic attacks, and then looking back, it was her first losing her mother, and then a few years later losing her grandmother, and most recently losing her aunt, all to the same cancer. And she said, I just wonder if the dance can help me relax a little bit because I can't sleep and I have panic attacks. And of course, she has each time she goes and say, well, okay, this is sucks, and I got to put on a brave face and try to be brave. And she actually did. She did with that particular lady. She did go to a support group, but it doesn't get to the root of that. And so it's something that it's become a cycle of get that bigger and bigger.
And I think today we've realized that, don't get me wrong, the cognitive practices are really, really important. They really are, because they can help the person that you are today to come to an understanding. But there are now techniques that can help people to sort of reconnect and heal the cellular level memory. But they aren't necessarily cognitive. So dance, I know it's something that I do, I help with people with, but that's not why I'm saying it, because I've listened to other things. I think there's more and more that understanding of getting to that underlying, that medication, cognitive, modern medicine can't touch.
Right. Right.
But they are the elements that it is really important to get to. To help us to be able to live that much more fulfilled life, to be able to recognize things like grief in all its forms. And I'm not going to use the words get over, but get ourselves through, because it is important. We're coming to certain other different understandings about life, depending on what your beliefs are, and I'm not going into beliefs. but we're still humans, we're still human beings, we still have human feelings.
Yeah.
And it is really important to feel those feelings, to let them happen. If we wish to have the tears, have them, release them, but not to live there.
Yeah.
It's that happy medium of allowing it. And that famous saying that everyone says, let it go. But it is about just being comfortable then with the fact that you've been true to those feelings. And then you've let yourself come out. You grow
Mm-hmm.
with it. Does that make sense?
Oh, it's absolutely. I think it's so important. You know, you point out two different things. You know, we have the mind, and a lot of time we have concepts of how things should be, and it's all nowadays the societies value the mind so much, right? And so we have concept on how things should be, and this and everything is all of this in the mind. And a lot of time we forget that we are human and we have feelings, and the feelings is much more important. And when we are grieving is all about feelings. And so it's something that we don't want to try to rationalize and say we got to be this way and we got to be that way. All feelings are different. Everybody feels. You might be experiencing two exact events, but at a different time, and you feel differently. Or you might have an identical twin witnessing one event, and each of them feel differently, because I call grief is like fingerprint. It's like all of us, we all have different fingerprints. And actually, if you look at your hand closely, you notice that different hands have different fingerprints. Isn't that interesting? But that's how we're meant to be. We're meant to be different, and so is our feeling. There is no good or bad feeling when we are grieving, and we want to recognize that it is feeling, and it's not necessarily in our head. So we don't judge ourselves, because if we judge ourselves when we're grieving and we don't do things that we think we're supposed to do because that's what society tell us we're supposed to do, then we grieve even more. Now we're grieving, and then we grieve even more because we think we're not doing things right. And then, but what we want to do is, as you said, we want to allow ourselves. We want to allow ourselves to feel and to just be kind to us, whether it's our whether we feel sad or whether we feel angry, to just acknowledge it and to honor it and to honor ourselves and allow ourselves the feeling. We're not running away from it, and like you said, we're not trying to get over it. But what it is actually we navigate ourselves through that, and we navigate through our grief and our feeling and our tough times, if it is a tough times, or if it is as it just changes, to navigate through the changes with a lot more ease. When we have understanding, such as what we discussed today, we will be able to navigate through that and then come out the other end with a lot more peace and a lot more ease and a lot more joy and a lot more fun as well. And then you can definitely learn to navigate different things from wonderful program like this one here with Sarah, the Healing Grief, that has multiple resources. There are also multiple different other ways, but what we want to do is we want to allow ourselves to feel and allow ourselves to just acknowledge what we're experiencing, and then move through them. And if you need help, receive help to move through them in a way that best suit you, whether it is doing counseling and group therapies, or perhaps it is dancing in your living room or doing artwork. Then another thing that helps a lot with grief is actually artwork, painting, because it's allow us to express our feeling in our artwork. Where you do painting, you do collage or something like that.
I think it's find what works for you, isn't it?
Exactly.
Personally, I love being out in nature. And if dance works for you, if creativity works for you, if going and just sitting or standing with your back against a tree and listening to the birds singing, whatever it is,
yeah,
the cognitive side has its place. It really has its place because it can help with an understanding, as I said. And once we've got that aspect in place, then I feel we can move into those deeper aspects. And we can really allow that energy of the dance. We allow the feelings. We allow it all. And we can learn to start taking control of it, but not control in respect of stopping it, control in respect of allowing it to have its path, whatever is necessary for us as an individual.
Yeah, yeah.
And we are all different. What may cause grief to one person doesn't to another. And when I sort of say to people, what is traumatic to a child? One word can be. And that one word, that trauma, is a grief. So it's just understanding that we are all beautifully unique. And what you think, how the heck can that have affected them in that way? But we have no idea what's gone on before that has created people to actually feel the way they do about whatever that thing is, that maybe that catalyst, which is really bringing up the old stuff.
Yeah, exactly.
And I think that's really important, is not for each one of us to stay out of any form of judgment, because we have no idea what's gone on in somebody else's life before that then brings about something today that doesn't make any sense to us.
Yeah, that's very true. And funny that you say that. And talking about not to judge people, and sometimes we think about judging people just if they do something wrong, but talking about grief that lasted in the past, started in the past, if you don't resolve them and it's affecting, and we don't want to judge people because we never know. I remember after my marriage dissolved, actually, I was meeting with somebody, and this gentleman after a while says, you're so sweet and this and that, but I just wish you were more skirt. I mean, you look nice in pants, but I just, I don't know. I don't think women who doesn't who wear a lot of pants and don't wear skirt are very feminine. So that's what his thought. And I look back, and it's actually very interestingly, I realized that up until then, or actually even afterward a little time, at some point in my life, I stopped wearing skirts, because when I was young, I was told I was a stiff, clumsy, ugly duckling with big legs. At some point in life, I in my grade school, I came home and said, I have a little bit of a tough time with this dance class, because I love dancing, but I have a tough time following steps actually in the dance class. And a family member looked at me and said, "Well, you should never dance. You're a stiff, clumsy, ugly duckling with big, ugly legs." And to a child, that was so hurting to me. I ran to the bedroom and hide and pretend that it's never happened. And talking about stuffing grief, I stuffed it away and I forgot about it completely, except that the fact is I actually stopped dancing for about 30 years. And then also I stopped wearing skirts completely until this, and there is another thing with that, until this person came out in my life and point that out. And I was like, "Oh, what's that all about?" And I realized that, that was such an unresolved grief from long, long ago, from 30 years ago, that's still affecting my life, such that I would I would not back then wear any skirts or any dresses, because I just must cover my big ugly leg from my childhood memories. And so that is something that's really is important for us to recognize that, and being able to resolve, because sometimes it's little nuances in life that we don't know and that affecting our life. And at the same time, like you said, you want to have your cognitive, and then you want to have your feelings to allow that. And knowing that a lot of times all this grief, even though it can be sounds very discouraging when we talk about grief and all the grief, but a lot of time when we actually resolve the grief, it's a lot of times shine a light of awareness to us and allow us to be able to learn from it, and to a lot of time benefit from it, and sort of like gain the reap the good from things that happen in the past. Many times we have things happen to us and we say, oh my God, why is this thing happening to me? But with my dance, my legs example, I was told a stiff, clumsy, ugly duckling, and the benefit from that I see in life now is I have people, and some of us who says, well, dancing is, I never dance in my life. You dance, Sarah Jane, but some people say, people come to the Dance Away Sadness, says, I never danced in my life, so how could I possibly be able to dance? Well, there is a dancer in all of us. There is a healer in all of us that wants to come through, and the benefit that we can have from something, even something happened in the past, is for me, if a stiff, clumsy, ugly duckling could dance and heal and help others to dance, so can you. And then with you, when you recognize the things happen in your life early on in the childhood, that's helped you to realize how much important it is for healing. And then now you are helping so many people with this gift of healing TV. That is just such an amazing work.
I think it's just a matter of all of us sharing, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
The more we share, the more we care, the more love there is in the world. Which is a saying that popped into my head several years ago, and it was just like, and I thought, I love that, because it is just about, and if only one person takes from this program, whether it's tonight, whether it's next week, whether it's next year, whether it's in 10 years, it's done exactly what is intended. It has helped somebody. And don't belittle yourself, don't judge yourself. Trust and believe in the process that you're going through, whatever it may be. As with Bajit, as with myself and my journey, and with all the other guests I've had on the program, our journey has led us to do what we do. Your own journey, where's that going to take you? And I refer to it as having been my healing journey. And we're all still going through it. At the end of the day, I don't know about you, Bajit, every now and again something crops up and you think, I thought I dealt with all of that.
Absolutely. Yes, definitely. It's a journey. Life is a journey. Life is a journey in general, I mean, you don't want to stuck in one place at life. Life is a lovely journey. And just like with a journey, sometimes you hit a little bumpers on the, a little bump on the road, but it doesn't mean we got to stop. It's simply just a little feedback, a little learning experience. And if we got on a road with a million potholes, then we simply try to find a different road. So life is a journey, and it is, and what is important is for us to be able to realize that. And so when things happen, whether it's whichever happening in life, we will be able to move through it, and knowing that it's a journey that we can be a little bit more at ease and a little bit more relaxed and grateful that we are all in this wonderful journey called life.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. This has been brilliant. And we've gone over time, but that's fine. Right, that's right with you, Bashik. Is there anything that you feel that sort of we've missed? There's anything you would like to share before we come to a close?
Well, one thing that I always love to share in general is, this is a wonderful medium. Sarah's provided this gift of healing, Stevie, and there are a lot of things out there. And at the end of the day, with every one of us, it is our decision.
Yes.
It's our decisions, that it is your decisions on how you want your life to be. There is a saying that our history does not determine our destiny. And that's very true. If you decide that your history, whatever happened to you in your childhood or yesterday, does not determine your destiny, and you take actions accordingly to a destiny that you would love, because otherwise we can have all this wonderful informations. It's almost just like when we an equivalent of, we read something about something nutritional, and this is good for our nutritions, and we say, oh, this is wonderful, this is good, this can get me healthier, but then you don't change your eating habit. You're not going to get healthier. And this and that's nutrition for our body. And a lot of and I know with the gift of healing tipi, you have information on things that's actually physical, as well as things like this that are nutritions for our mind and our feelings and our emotions. And so the point of everything is, if we are recognizing that there is something we want to improve, then we decide it's up to you. It's your decisions to decide that it is if you need to change something and take actions accordingly.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. It is our choice. Bajit's website is from grieving to joyfulliving.com. That should already be on the Gift of Healing TV website. And when the video of this program goes up, I will make sure it goes under the YouTube version of the video as well, so that you can get in touch with Bajit directly if you wish to, and learn more about what she does. So please do. And you were talking before we started about a book that has just gone to the publisher. Is your book to do with this?
Yes, actually it is. It is a book called Seeking Peace, the Proven 5 Fingers Method for Thriving Through Change Effortlessly. As we know, life full of changes, and it uses our 5 fingers to make things easy to remember. The step-by-step process of navigating and moving through change and thrive, and doing that effortlessly and with a lot more ease and actually a little bit fun as well. And so that book is coming up. It's the schedule to publish on November 20th, and it's it's a book that combine, as you see the way I share, using a lot of stories. So it's a book that combines stories as well as principles, so that we don't all fall asleep reading it.
Oh, lovely.
I had my experience of having to read textbook about that big for my oncology, and I'm like, I will not make anybody do this. So.
Excellent. So, and that I'm assuming will go onto your website once it's available.
Yes, it will be on the website once it's available. You can contact me through the website as well, and see all the informations that I have there that's complimentary for you, and all the different options, and how to receive more information, receive more healing in there as well, different meditations and so forth.
Excellent, excellent. thank you so much for sharing with us. It's been a real pleasure, and I really hope, folks, that you can take from this and you realize that there's nothing wrong with you. It is just how life is, and things that people are becoming to understand more and more, are things at a deeper level, and that is what it's about. And realizing that, and hopefully it has helped you to realize that. I think, oh, okay, I'm not so different. There are people out there. None of us are alone in what we're going through, even if it's not identical. So we just aren't. Next week, Thoughtful Nuggets and Pearls, journey versus destination. And hopefully my sister Jackie is going to be joining me. At the moment, that's the thought, but she may not be. We'll see. If she is, then great. So I hope you will join us for that. Brigitte, thank you so much for joining us. It's been a real pleasure. And we'll get together again at some stage. Folks, thank you for joining us. Thank you for being with us. Love, peace, and light to you all. Namaste.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.